Okay guys, welcome back for another uncensored repair. Here we have a Motorola G31. Customer brought me this phone last week due to some water damage. It was completely perished, not looking good at all. So I have repaired the motherboard. After some hours, got that working, and it needed a new screen, so I've replaced the screen. This was perished due to water damage, so we don't need that anymore. New screen is now on the phone. I haven't taken off the protection yet, just in case the side buttons don't work, so I can send the screen back. But the new screen is now on, and now we're going to need to try and put some new side buttons on. Now I've got these side buttons ordered from Spain. It is literally the only place I could get them from. They actually call them motorcycle buttons. So here they are. And we're going to put these on the phone and see if it actually works. Fingers crossed it does. The old buttons, the connector on them was really badly melted / damaged. I don't know whether you can see that, but they're really pretty damaged. Hopefully on the next stream I can get my microscope rolling so you'll be able to see things a little better. I've also got another camera on the way as well, so you'll be able to see the other side of the workshop as well, where I do a lot of the work on the motherboards and consoles and things like that as well. But yeah, so this one is another simple-ish repair, but it needs doing. And so we're going to start off by removing the actual back chassis, and then we're going to get into the innards of the phone, replace this the buttons. These buttons actually control the lock button or the home button or whatever you want to call it. Got the volume as well. And we've got this, well, I don't know what the name for that button is, but it's got one of those as well. So we're going to start off taking every single screw we can see off the back of the phone. Helps when your screwdriver is magnetized. There we go, that's a little better. Some of them don't want to come out. We'll get those out in a bit. Make sure you don't miss any on these phones, because you can actually tear out the cups for the screws from the other side of the chassis where the LCD is and damage that when you try and yank them out. So you've got to make sure every single screw is out on these. So that's them all out from the top, and we're going to be doing the ones at the bottom as well. Might as well do the speaker first. They're all the same size screws, it doesn't matter if you mix them up. There we go. And that's all good. So the next thing we need to do is remove the SIM tray. Some people forget to remove the SIM tray, yank the back of the chassis off, and then damage the whole SIM tray. So it's important to remove the SIM tray. so you don't rip out the actual SIM dock. And that's another point to make as well, is the weakest part of one of these chassis is where the SIM tray is. And it's pointless trying to lever off the back of the phone any other area, because you're not going to be able to do it very easily. So you might as well go for the easiest option, which is the SIM tray. Now SIM trays will have a little bit of plastic next to the chassis, which will bend quite easily. As you can see, it's bending when I just put my finger in there. It's not going to snap, but it is bending. So I'll get my metal spudger and I'll put it where the SIM tray is, and I'll just go around the phone like that and start it off. And as you can see, it's come off very easily. So now I can just literally do the rest with my fingers. Yeah, it's going to prove me wrong now, isn't it? There we go. And that's off nice and easy. Next thing you want to do is take out the battery connector. So just flick it out with your nail to put it to the side, so it's not going to surge onto that or anything like that. And also just a quick inspection of the port where the buttons go, just to make sure that's all right. It looks okay. But what I'm going to do, just to be sure, is give it a bit of a clean with some isopropyl alcohol, just to make sure it's nice and clean, ready for the new buttons to go on there. So we get some isopropyl alcohol. Got a little bit in this little tub here, and we need a toothbrush, preferably a clean toothbrush. There we go. Clean toothbrush. Now isopropyl alcohol won't damage any electronic parts, even if it's still wet on there. You could still generally use the phone or the device or whatever you want to use while it's still wet. The only thing I would not recommend is getting it on the LCD or anything like that, because if it gets in between the LCD layers, then you might have a problem. But anyway, just lightly brush that onto the connector and make sure that's all clean. As I said earlier, I have done a lot of work on this motherboard, getting it back up to scratch. And if you did see the motherboard, I did share some pictures on my Facebook. You would have seen how bad it was. So it's a miracle it's even working at all. So there we go. There's the connector cleaned. And what I'm going to do is now leave that to just go off for a bit, the isopropyl evaporate, and we're going to work on this. And these are the side buttons for the phone, and yeah, we're going to replace these. These have got like a little catch on the inside of the phone. And it looks like yeah, it looks like they're actually on here. I'm sorry, I thought it was on the casing like some of the other devices, but anyway, so we're gonna have to remove the motherboard to get to these motorcycle buttons. And what's Fudweiser saying? Don't forget to toss in a bunch of loose screws before you close up the case. yeah, bro. Alright, so we're going to remove the connectors on the bottom of the phone. Usually on these motherboards there is a screw in some location, usually just one screw. but it appears on this one, unless I'm not seeing it, there's not a screw. Anyway, let's get off the motherboard. Looks like the motherboard on this one gets inserted into the top of the phone, so we don't want to lever the motherboard out from the top of the phone. Also, if we're going to get the motherboard out of this device, we're going to need to make sure that we remove the Wi-Fi cables first. The last thing we want to do is to rip those off the motherboard. Then the customer won't have a phone signal or any Wi-Fi connection. And yeah, so I think that's ready to come out. Is anything else left on there? Battery's out, Wi-Fi's out, bottom connectors are out. Cameras don't make any difference, we can leave those in. So we're going to start off with a place on the motherboard where there's not really anything to damage. We're going to slowly lift up, but usually a corner will do it. And yeah, there we go. So the motherboard's out, nice and easy. Just check some of the repairs. The main repairs are on the back here. They look good to me. Yeah. Still look fine. Alright. So we're going to replace these motorcycle buttons. Here we have the poles that connect to the bottom of the motherboard using a pressure connector. And we're going to just rip this off the board. Probably best to use a Stanley knife or something like that just to get it off. Get right in between the buttons and the board. There we go. And that lifts up nicely. Same with this part here. I'm not going to really damage this just in case it's not the buttons that's the problem. So this is still in usable condition. Okay, so we have the brand new ones here. As I said earlier, the only place you could get these was all the way from Spain, so a big thanks to imaticalospalicios.com for providing the buttons. These buttons have a sticky on the back of them, and they've got to be sticked into the exact place where the other buttons were. So we need to take off the little coating that's on there, so we use a little Stanley knife to get that off. And get that off very nicely. While we're at it, we're going to get the coating off this part as well, because once we stick that on there, it's going to be very difficult to do so. Like so. And we're going to get this stuck onto the chassis. Alright, so you can generally see where it lines up to, where it needs to go anyway. It's actually a lot different compared to the other one. The other one had like a ribbon in between the top layer of buttons and the bottom layer, but this one is just all one piece. So I'm not sure whether that makes any difference or not. We'll soon find out. But anyway, as long as they work, that's the main thing. So there's little grooves for the poles to fit into on the chassis here. We're just going to put those into the grooves, fold that over like that, just like the other one was, and we should be good to go. So let's pop the motherboard back in. As we were talking about earlier, motherboard must go in the top first. You can't remove the motherboard from the top, so it must go in the top first. There we go. While the motherboard's in and in the right place, let's get these connectors back in. There's one. there's the display one. We're not going to connect the battery up just yet. We need to get the network cables back in. First one is the white one, which is number 1. White is always number 1, and there's always a number 1 where white goes. Number 2 is always black. Okay. Now we need to refit the rear cover. It helps if the battery is connected. There we go. Just click it all the way around like that. Careful with the corners, because that's where the screen is the most brittle. It seems to me that their system of buttons is pretty bad. Does it work? Like I showed you earlier, this one had a bit of a ribbon onto the downside of it, whereas this other one hasn't. So I'm not sure whether I'm happy with that. Well, we'll just have to check it out, won't we? So the main thing now is to connect everything back up and to see if the phone is going to produce an image. There we go, we've got the rear connector back on the back for the button. Then we'll put back in the SIM tray. Double check the sides for anything sticking out. Looks good. Don't need to put the screws back in yet. We're just going to test it out. So this phone is a USB-C. So we're going to plug a USB-C in. Does it produce an image? Yes, it does. Does it charge? Yes, it does. Will it turn on? No, it won't. Oh, it does. It does. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Yes. Does the screen work? Yes, it does. Brilliant. So now we know that the screen's working and the phone works. We can take the coating off the screen. Oh yes. You know you like that. And we're gonna put the brightness right up, and sometimes screens glitch when the brightness is right up, but yeah, this one seems fine. Locking works, unlocking, locking, unlocking. Does the volume work? Up, down, yes. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay, so that is a success. So now we're going to turn the phone off. Annoyingly, on some of these devices, you have to put a PIN code in just to turn the fucking thing off. Right? Will this be the case? No, it won't. Thank God for that. Alright. So now we know the phone is fully working and it's a success. Next thing we need to do is to pop all the screws back in and then apply the back. And also there's a little a metal cover to put on this area that goes onto the button connector. And yeah, I think that's about that for another repair for a customer. So we know now that these buttons that we replaced were faulty, so we can just tear that and destroy it, whatever, and get rid of this little bit of rubbish here and put the SIM tray out the way. Finally, screw the screws back together. Screw the chassis back together, sorry. We always start at the edges when we screw a chassis back together. Corner to corner first. Because those are the weakest parts of the phone, so those are the ones that we want to make sure are secured first. Don't screw it too tightly, always just do it finger tight, and then just a little bit tighter like that. Once you've done the edges, then you can go into the center ones. I always do the outside of the center ones first. Doesn't really matter about the bottom ones. Almost done with these screws. Then we need to put the button connector shield back on. I just need to find it though. It's somewhere on my desk here. There it is. One button shield. So the button shield jams into the one side first, and that keeps the buttons pressed, or the button connector pressed down into position, so if you drop your phone it doesn't come undone. There we go. Okay, so now that all the screws are in, we're just going to do one final test before we put the back on. I'm not liking the feel of this button. Doesn't feel great. Anyway, it's working. phone is booting up, which is great. So these generally have some like silicon. Hello, Moto. These have like a silicon sealant sticky that goes around the edge, and when you remove them, it tends to fold in on itself, which is not great, which means the edge doesn't go back on properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all this silicon off the back. Because it's only for single use, really. I wouldn't be doing a proper job if I left that on. Comes off fairly easy, really. Almost done, just a bit at the bottom. Would not recommend using any scraping tools or anything to get this off, just so we don't damage the rear cover. It's just best to do it with your fingers. Alright, let's get rid of this crap. Okay, so we need to put the back on. So what we're going to use is E8000 glue. The actual packaging for the glue is rubbed off because when you're squeezing it onto phones it just comes off very easily. But anyway, this is E8000 glue. Highly recommend you get E8000 glue if you're repairing any electronics or any phones or anything like that, or even anything outside. You can literally seal anything up with it, and it's waterproof as well, and it doesn't conduct electricity or anything like that, so it's super safe to use anywhere. And also it smells very good. I wouldn't recommend smelling it for too long though. Alright, so this glue's got like a fine tip to it, and it's fairly difficult to get it out, so you're going to want to fold it over, get all the glue to the bottom of the tube and squeeze it. You don't really want to put too much glue on the back here. Oh, I've just noticed something before we even do that. There's a bit more silicone on the actual chassis that we need to remove. And because it's the chassis and it is metal, I'm going to use the spudger. It's way quicker than using your hands. There we go. That is off. There's a little bit down the side here. Beautiful. Okay. So, all the way around the edge, and it looks like it had some around the camera area as well, so we could put a bit around there, and possibly some just on the back of where the rear speaker assembly is that produces the sound for the phone. whether you can see that or whether you need to see it. I'm just going around the edge of the rear plastic, just a light line. Make sure there's no gaps at all, don't want any air gaps at all. Needs to be totally sealed, just in case they do drop it in water again. I do love the smell of this glue. There we go. It's a full continuous line all the way around the rear plastic, and now we're going to go around the camera. We don't want water in around the camera, do we? So we'll go around that. Make sure it's all nice and perfectly joined like that. And last of all, like I said, we're going to go over the back where the bottom speaker is. So I'm just going to put a line off on the back where the where that is. Maybe put another one over this little join piece here. Not going to go too high because that's where the battery is, and we want to get the battery out maybe in the future if the customer needs it doing. There we go. I'm just going to leave that for maybe a minute to go tacky. I'm not going to put it straight on because they tend to flex off, so we'll leave it to go tacky for a little bit. And while I'm waiting, how are you, Fudweiser? Are you good? Are you still watching? Yeah, so I've got a new camera coming, hopefully tomorrow, that I'll be able to record the workstation behind me over there for all the soldering and things like that, and all the work with the heat, with the heat. And also I'm gonna connect up my microscope as well, so be able to see the microscope work on the other side as well. That'll be connected up to OBS, and also maybe a camera at the side of my office over there pointing at me, because you can't really see who I am or whatever at the moment. So yeah, but this office is literally full of repair parts and things like that to help me fix consoles. Over here I've got literally every single screen for the iPhones. Over there I've got everything that I need to fix the consoles. Up the top on that side of the room I've got everything needed to fix tablets. And behind me in the drawers I've got all charge ports and many parts and things like that to fix all types of devices, like, I don't know, Nintendo Switches and things like that. I've also got all the HDMI ports for all the consoles in the back drawers as well. So generally we can fix most problems that the customers bring to us. Okay, I think that's about enough time for leaving this to go tacky. So now we're just going to pull it on. So we'll line up the top first. Make sure the camera is going to fit through the gap. That's the most important thing. Then we're going to press down the rest of it. All evenly around the edge to make sure no moisture can get into there. Okay, and the last thing is, obviously this is now a working phone. we're going to hold the back in place using something very technical. Not many repair technicians use these special items, but I do, and that is clothes pegs. So we'll start with the corners. We use these pegs because they're very light. Some pegs are like really strong, and we don't want to use pegs like that. So really light pegs. Very delicate on the screens. These screens are so brittle, you can literally breathe on them and they'll probably crack. So we use very, very light pegs. Again, as we put the pegs on, we always go in opposites. These pegs are actually silicone lined, so they're even softer when they touch the screens. We always make sure the screen's on as well when putting the pegs on, because then we can see if there's any imminent damage occurring when the pegs press on the screen. Well, luckily everything looks good, so we'll just carry on. And we'll put an additional one at the top as well, because that's where the camera is, and we want to make sure that's sealed around there. And that's about it for this phone. We're going to leave this phone now overnight, just to make sure that the back sticks to the chassis nice and properly, and there's no gaps. What I tend to do with these is, unlike the iPads where you would have a center point to balance the device on while the clamps clamp down the front glass, or digitizer, or whatever you want to call it. With these, what I like to do is get just a normal hard surface and put the pegs down. For the simple reason is because when the weight of the phone is pushing on the pegs, it is pushing the back plastic into the chassis with the weight of the phone, and that helps it set into place. People would think, oh, why don't you turn it the other way around, because you want the gravity to pull it down. Well, no, that's complete bullshit, right? All that's going to do is press the screen and not actually do anything with the back very much. So you want to make sure you tip it that way and you leave the back to dry just like that. And that's it for the Motorola G31 water damaged. I will send some more images on what it actually looked like before. As some of you probably seen before on Facebook, the motherboard was absolutely completely destroyed. So it is an absolute miracle that it was even working at all. So that's another success, guys. Another happy customer. Some more money in the bank. And as you know, I like to buy shit coins with my money. This is why I do this. So more money to buy more shit coins. Thanks for watching, guys, and until the next repair, hopefully tomorrow,